Hello, everyone. Good day. It's Carlos Australia here from CAD Group. Thanks for joining us in today's webinar on Vault 2025, where we'll have a look at all the good and great stuff that's been introduced. I can see that the number of attendees coming in has slowed down a bit, so I think we can get started. My name is Carlos Australia. I'm the National Technical Manager for CAD Group and also Data Management Specialist. I'm hoping that today you'll find a lot of reasons to move on to 2025, which I think is quite a big improvement to some of the, I guess, small features, but it has a lot of improvement in the ways we would work things inside Vault. So without further ado, let me go on to my next slide. Now, I've broken down this webinar into three major areas. So the first one really is for creators and editors. Oh, sorry. By the way, before that, look, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put anything in the questions window in GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. Or at the end of this, I will also have a Q&A session where you can just unmute yourself and we can have a discussion. All right. So anyway, as I was saying, Vault 2025, I've divided this webinar into three major areas. We'll talk about the features that are of interest to those who are creating and editing content, those who will be administering Vault, not just from a, I guess, from a CAD administration perspective, but also from an IT administration perspective. And then lastly, we'll have a look at some of the enhancements that relate to the how participants, or mainly document consumers, file consumers, will now start using Vault. All right, let's have a look at how Vault 2025 will improve the lives of creators and editors. Now, this is a big, big one. This has been requested from Vault, from Autodesk for a number of years already, and it's finally here. And this is the email notification feature. So in the past, what would happen is that if you would transition a file from one state to the other, there was really no automatic way to inform the next person who needs to, for example, review the files. There was no way to inform them that, hey, this file needs your review. Um, by the same token, if you then approved or issued a file for manufacture, there was no way to tell the production team, hey, this file is now ready for you to work off on. Now, in the past, the way we solved this was through some customizations in the job processor that we built out using Cool Orange Power Jobs. But now, with Vault 2025, we now have email notifications out of the box. So now what will happen is that you can now send email notifications when files have reached a certain state in the life cycle. And depending on that kind of transition, you can choose a template for that transition. Now, what happens is that these files, when they are transitioned from one state to another, you have to define either an email address or a group that will receive that email. So for example, let me pull up my screen here. So this is the Vault 2025 interface. Looks very much the same as previous editions of Vault, but some enhancements here and there that basically is in line with Windows 11. Okay. Now, let me just check. Okay, yep. Okay, so if we now go to Tools, Administration, Vault Settings, let me bring it over here. You will see now under the Behaviors tab, there's now this new Notifications button here. Okay, so that's calling it up now. All right, so there's two major areas that you set. So the first thing that you'd have to define is which lifecycle state process do you want to apply a email notification to, and in that lifecycle process, what is the source state and what is the target state. So in this particular, for example, I'm configuring when a file goes from work in progress, when a file that's in the CG simple release process goes from work in progress to released. Okay, I can choose a specific template of what that email will look like, and then I can choose a recipient list. So when I go to members to add members, for example, I can then add individual members, okay? Or I can add groups. So for example, if I want the administrators to get a notification, or in this case, I've already specified that approvers group will get notifications. And by the way, this groups here, this is the same groups that we have for all of our access control lists inside Vault. So it's the same list. It's not a separate list altogether. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to now send an email to the approvers. Now, what is important here, whether you select a group like this, or whether you select, for example, an individual user, okay, that email address that they will be receiving this information from is actually in Tools Administration Global Settings under the Manage Access area. You have to make sure, oops, what did I do there? I dragged something that's not supposed to be. Whatever, for that particular user, you need to make sure that this email alias is filled in. Okay, so that will actually send off that email to that particular user using this email address. All right, I'm just having a look if there are any questions at this point. Nothing yet. Okay, let's proceed. So again, I'm going to go back Tools, Administration, Vault Settings, under Behaviors, Notifications. So then basically that's how simple it is to set up. Now, when you get to the email templates, because for every for every email notification configuration you have, you can choose a specific template of what the email will look like. So to look at those templates, you look at the email templates area here, and you can say, okay, whenever the name of this template is to approved. So whenever a file goes to an approved state using the CG flexible workflow, okay, I can say that the file, this is the email body, and I have several variables that I can fill in. And when I fill in those variables, for example, in this case, file name, and if I want to add another property to that, I can say under files, I can say these are all the properties of that particular file. So for example, revision, I'm going to include that at, and then just add some text, revision, and then the file revision, and then that will basically tell me that these files have been submitted, or basically tell the user that this is the information that they need to process. Now, it'll also have a hyperlink to that particular um, file inside Vault, so that when they click on that hyperlink, that will lead them directly to the file inside Vault. Okay, so that's what that particular email template looks like. And again, you've got the usual text editing tools if you want to change the color of this, if you want to make it bold, larger font, justification, add images and logos and stuff like that. You can do that in this particular interface. Okay, let me just quickly, I had this earlier, apologies. I wanted to show you, okay, here's one. So this is a very simple example of what the email will get, that will get sent. Okay, and I think, yep. So basically, the following files have been transitioned to review state. You get the file name, you get the transitions, you can also get the hyperlink, what vault, what username, and the time. So again, all of this is configurable in this particular template area here. Okay, so let me just cancel into that and bring this back here. Right. So basically, that's the email notification features. Again, the one thing that I have to emphasize is that you have to predefine for each life cycle state, you have to predefine who is going to get that email, or a group that gets that email. There isn't an option yet to choose specifically when you do the life cycle transition. There isn't an option yet to actually choose a specific user to receive that particular email. Hopefully that's something that people can put onto the idea station. If I'm not mistaken, there is already an idea on the idea station on that, and you can have a look at that and vote on it. Okay, no questions as of yet. Let's go on to the next one. So another thing that's changed is in 2025, Vault now supports TLS and SSL, particularly TLS 1.1, 1.2, and SSL for email notifications. So this is more of an admin thing, and IT admin thing, because in the past, older editions of Vault, you couldn't just use the normal email credentials because it wouldn't support SSL. Now it does. Okay, and there's also drop downs on configuring the email notifications based on several of the most popular email providers. So you just have to enter those details. So this is a big improvement because in the past we needed some workarounds to actually create or send that email because Vault wasn't capable of sending by SSL, which is basically standard for all email servers nowadays. So that's, I think, a really great improvement, particularly from an IT perspective. Okay, this is another really helpful improvement. PDF properties. So now inside Vault, you can actually map your user-defined properties to file properties of that PDF. So for example, let me call up this one here. So for example, this particular file, I've got the user-defined property called subject. Okay, if I go to that working folder, in fact, let me just open up that file. That's that under document properties. Whatever properties you have here, that can now get pulled into the Vault itself. So that if you need to search for something that depends on the user-defined properties you've got on that PDF, you will be able to now map that into Vault as well. And the same way, it's a push-pull kind of situation. At least that's how it's configured by default. That if you wanted to make a change to this, you can then edit that property, and that property will get written down to the PDF, right? So that is one of the nice improvements inside, or at least when using PDFs. But to tell you honestly, I think what is even greater with this function is that now we can content index PDFs out of the box. Okay, in the past, and just to give you an idea of what content indexing is. So if, for example, I'm searching for something, I'm going to go at the very top here and I'm going to search for, let's say I'm going to search for the word PDMC. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that my file content indexing is turned on. If I search for that, you notice now it brings up that particular PDF. And although the word PDMC is not in the file name, neither is it in the subject or any of the map properties, the reason that's actually called up is because it's actually read that text inside the PDF itself. Okay, it's read the text inside the PDF itself and brought that up back in the search results. Now, in the past, for us to achieve this, we needed some third-party iFilters, which you had to purchase from an iFilter provider and then install that on the server. And like in the past, there was also some security issues or risks associated with those third-party iFilters. Now, you don't need any of that. That's now available inside Vault straight away. One thing you would also noticed, for example, is that now I now have thumbnails, actual proper thumbnails for PDF files inside the Vault client, right? In the past, this was something that we'd only see like a PDF icon. Now I've got a thumbnail to it. Of course, you can still, as in the past, you could always use the Autodesk viewer to view that PDF directly. But the thumbnails was quite an interesting thing. And this is, I know some of our customers have actually requested or looking for this particular feature, is that when you look at something inside the thin client, and let me log into the thin client, those thumbnails will also appear for PDFs. Sorry, I did not approve or release that PDF. I should have a PDF here that's approved. Bear with me. There we go. So that's a PDF, and you can see the thumbnail. Now, in saying that, it's a bit small, still a bit small, right? Even if I increase the thumbnail column, it has only that size of the thumbnail. So unless you've got zoom on your browser or something like that, and if you look at that, and when it zooms, it's actually not really giving us the expected result, I guess. Okay, so either we're just, at least it gives us a step. That's one step towards a great solution. But now I guess I find that very, very useful. Okay, just had a look at a question here. Can it use any SMTP? Sorry, do you have to set up an SMTP server on the Vault machine for the email notifications to work, or can it use any SMTP server? No, you can use an SMTP server that's outside or basically installed not on the Vault machine. So if your SMTP server is, let's say, on another server on premise, or your SMTP server is on the cloud like Office 365, you can do that. Michael, I hope that answered your question. Okay. Let's have a look at the next one. This is a pet peeve, right? When you're using the move command from one location to the other, okay, what would happen is that it would just move it. And to be honest, I've been caught out with this a couple of times where my mouse was faster than my brain, and I've accidentally moved the file to a folder and not realize it, or at least belatedly realize it, and then say, oh, which folder did I move that to? So in the past, I've always recommended to our customers during training is that there is an option to actually have a prompt. Whenever you move something, after you drag and drop the move, it'll ask you, you're about to move the file? Do you want to continue? You can say yes or no. So that used to be a prompt that you had to configure inside Vault simply by going to um, tools, options, and if you're still in the older version of Vault, you should use this. Under configure prompts, there's this option here to move to folder using drag and drop. Okay. Response yes, and the default is never prompt. Okay, now I switched this earlier, but now the default becomes always prompt, so that when you're moving files and folders, you will be able to, or you will get that dialog box. Okay, now another thing that's really handy is that when we're moving stuff inside the Vault itself, so let's say, for example, here I search for all PDFs, okay, and then have a look at this one, and then I want to do, let's say, this particular folder, I want to drag it onto demo. Have a look. It's now dragged that onto the demo folder. Now, in the past, what would happen is that when I dragged and dropped that, Vault would now, after dragging and dropping into the demo folder, Vault would now actually, oops, sorry, I've got this dialog box here. Yes. Vault would move its focus, meaning it would actually go to the demo folder and see that PDF there, right? That was a pain because now if I wanted to look at my search results again, I have to do that search all over again. Or even if it was a saved search, I have to do that all over again. Now in Vault 2025, you actually can now drag this and move it to whatever folder you want, and it will still keep the focus on the source folder location. So I can now continue doing my job of moving stuff from one folder to the other quite easily. So again, that is a really big improvement. It saves a whole heap of time when you're doing a lot of move operations inside Vault. Now, for that to happen though, okay, you will need to make a change to this particular file. So there's a file inside your computer for Vault, and the path is this one here. The particular file is connectivity.vaultpro.exe.config. you have to add this particular key. Add key, move operation, focus, source, location, and the value is true. Okay. Now, you want to take a screenshot of this, that's fine, but also that is actually in the Vault 2025 help that you'll find that particular or that particular option. And let me just call that up. Bear with me. So in the Vault Professional 2025 help, under set focus location, you can just copy and paste the, actually, don't just copy and paste these lines because these double quotes behave strangely. So you can copy and paste, but just make sure, try and re-enter the double quotes properly. Okay. But that is how you would set that. Okay. All right. Next thing that we can look at is copy design. Now this slide is especially for Vault Basic users, because Vault Pro users, you've always had this copy design functionality, the basically what Autodesk called the new copy design function, which was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, I think in Vault 2020 or something like that. And it only ever used to be in Vault Professional and Vault Workgroup. Vault Basic had the old copy design, but now in 2025, you now have the new copy design in Vault Basic available. So what I love about this, particularly from a Vault Basic perspective, is that you can easily find and replace names and paths of where you're going to go to or copy the files to, and also define action rules. So for example, if you're copying an IDW file, you can say remove the approved by property iProperties because it's a brand new copy, right? Remove the revision value in the title block because it's a brand new copy. So that's a really great improvement for copy design for Vault Basic. Now, this particular feature of copy design of reusing library files is now also available not just in Vault Basic, but this is new also to Vault Pro users, where you can now have a right-click option to reuse branch or library files effectively. So in the past, by default, library files were always shown, or sorry, were hidden from view. When you're doing a copy design, you actually had to choose the option to show the library files. And when you did that, you would run in the situation where you right click copy branch to it and also try and copy those library files. Now you can avoid that by having this reuse library file, branch library files, or reuse library files option inside the copy design function. Okay, just checking if there's any more questions. Nothing yet. Okay. Anything in the chat? Nothing yet. Okay. Now let's move on to the next one, and this is a bit, I guess, a small feature, but quite useful, especially for those who are using change orders. Normally, when you go, for example, to do a change order, sometimes the files change state from one to the other, and if you wanted to, you could now right-click and do a synchronize properties right from the file in the records grid. Okay, so it's a small improvement, and maybe I guess a small group of customers would appreciate this, but for those who do use it, you'll find this as something very useful. Okay, this is another one that's quite interesting. In Vault 2022, was it? Well, Autodesk introduced a new method of usernames. So in the past, whatever your Vault login name was, for example, whatever your Vault login name was, that was what would be placed under created by, checked out by, and all of these entities or entries, okay, that required a username to be recorded against it. Now, oops, not that one. I'll go to Tools, Administration, Global Settings. For users, starting from Vault 2022, this is now displaying all of those entities actually now would display particularly created by would display the display name, which is would be quite different from, for example, what is your actual login name, because your login name is determined either by your oops Where'd that go? Sorry. By Autodesk ID, or if you're using like traditionally it's a Vault account or Windows authentication, this is now separate or decoupled from what the display name is. Now, the problem with that is sometimes the display name can be quite long. And so instead of using a display name, you can now search against what's called at me. And that is effectively replacing anything that, replacing that at me with whatever your username is. So another impact of this is that this allows you, for example, as an admin, and this is something that if you've been using Vault 2024, you will know that we now have what's called distributed searches. So for example, if I do a find for any files that are checked out but contains at me, for example, and I save that, I save it as a distributed search, checked out by me. Now, anyone who logs into Vault will have this saved search. Now, I don't have anything checked out to me, that's why it's not giving anything. But because at me is generic, anyone can use this search, and it will actually search for the checked out files by their display name. So again, that at me, you can use that at me search at any point in this inside Vault. So whether you're not, say, for example, created by at me, I'm not in that right folder, but that at the me function is going to be the one that you can now start using. Oops, sorry. Ah, sorry, I made a mistake on what I was just presenting. So this is the at me function, and this works, for example, both on the thin and thick client for those searches and basic and advanced searches. Okay. Now, the other one that I actually skipped over was this one here, the criteria-based basic search. So what happens here in the criteria-based basic search is in the past, if you, let's say, have a look at, okay, let's have a look at all IPTs. And then when you have all of the IPTs, then you would use the filter option here and filter out, okay, I just want to see all that's released, for example. Okay. Now, in this particular search, or what I can do is that I can now have this drop down here and say apply criteria of, and whatever is in my saved search folder. So for example, I've got a saved search that says that, sorry, excuse me. I have a saved search that says, show me all of the IPTs or the IAMs, basically inventor parts or inventor assemblies that have a drawing, because Vault actually has a property that checks whether or not a part file has a drawing associated with it, and it says true. So effectively what this search is saying, okay, give me all the IPT and IAMs that have a drawing associated with it. Now, going back to my original search, if I search for .ipt, okay, if I wanted to find out which of these part files have had drawings associated with it, I can just drop this down, apply criteria of IPT or IAM drawing, basically my save search. You notice that that I icon appears because it's applied, and then I hit enter, then it now searches for all files. So all of these files effectively, I know has a drawing against it. Okay. One thing to be careful of is that that is now that search is now applying all throughout. Okay, that filter. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that after applying that, then you untick that. Otherwise, you might be wondering why my search results aren't giving me the results I'm expecting. Okay. Now let's go on to the next one. Yep, that's a search with me. Okay, this is another thing from the idea station where for if you use items or custom objects, you couldn't copy hyperlinks for it, right? In the past, this option is always available for file objects, but not for items and custom objects. Now for items and custom objects, you now have that copy hyperlink option for it. I will say though, it's still one item or one file at a time. You can't select multiple, do a copy hyperlink, and have everything there. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you look at my slide deck at the bottom, you will see which version this applies to. So this is the 2020, this specific feature is available in the 2025.1 update. Throughout the presentation, you would have seen which update that particular feature applied to. Okay, this is another one that I find very useful, particularly from a troubleshooting perspective. This has to do sometimes when you've got multiple monitors. Let's say you're working from the office, you've got 2 monitors in the office plus your laptop, you're using Vault, everything like that, it's all good. You go home, obviously you unplug your monitors, you go home and you're working on a single monitor, or you're working on a different monitor configuration, and you do some Vault activities. And all of a sudden you do, let's say for example, change state, and nothing happens. Like the change state dialog box doesn't appear. Now, technically, what's happening there is the change state dialog box has appeared, but it's off screen because it was expecting it to show in this particular monitor. That's no longer plugged in. Now with Vault 2025, you can run this command line prompt. Basically, this is the Vault executable plus reset dialog locations, and it will bring everything back into the original screen. Okay. Now, there's also another one called reset all client settings. So what this will do though is any of your customizations inside options, or if you've got any saved searches, saved views that are not distributed, this will blow them all away. So I would use this reset all client settings very carefully. Let me check before we go on to the administrators. Any questions? Nothing yet. Okay, let's move on. So for administrators, and this is what I was referring to earlier. Now, this is in the 2024.2 update. You can now deploy client views, searches, save searches, shortcuts to all users. So whether or not you're using, as I showed you earlier, when I was doing my save search, for example, this one here, this is an IPTORIM, I can open that save search, right? This is now a search that only appears on my computer. If I drag this down here to distributed searches, this search now is going to be available to anyone who logs into this particular vault. Okay, so this now gets distributed to everyone else. So for example, an easy way to do this is when you go files, let's say find me all file extension is DWG, and I want the state to be released. Okay, I'm going to save that, and this is on my released DWG files. I click on save as distributed search, click OK, and again, that makes it available for everyone. Now, that's for save searches. You can also do that for shortcuts. So just in case, just to refresh you, shortcuts, or you can go to a particular file, drag and drop them into my shortcuts, or let's say if it's just this particular folder here, and I can say, okay, this is a shortcut to that folder. Now that can also be available as a distributed shortcut. So again, everybody who logs into Vault will have these same shortcuts. Same applies for views. So if you're defining your own kind of views, and where did that view dialog go? Yeah, and this is because I'm on a different screen on that I'm presenting to. There it is. So now you can customize all the views as usual, and then now you can tick them as distributed. Again, which makes it available to anyone who logs into that particular Vault. So it's a great way for administrators, Vault admins, to set up Vault the way you want your end users to see it. That will also apply on the thin client. So in the thin client, you have default views that you can save as the view for everyone, okay, which is not really a new feature. Save searches though, the save search method for thin client, you would still need to do the browser shortcut method for that. Okay. Now, something that's also changed between 25 release to market, RTM is released to market, and update 1 is that in the past, you needed to be an administrator to actually create those distributed views and shortcuts. Okay. Now, configuration administrator role will be allowed to make any of those distributed settings. Okay. Small change, but quite handy. Oh, this is another big one. So, in the past, when you run the purge, you could right click on a file and run the purge on that file. Okay, and it would do purge based on the purge rules that you've defined for that life cycle for life cycle states. Now inside Vault, you can now right click on an entire folder to purge all of the contents of that folder. Again, this will still require you to set up the rules for purging in the lifecycle definition or on the server itself. Like rules for purging, for example, if files that are work in progress, only keep the first and last. Files that are released, never purge any file that is in a state of release. Okay, so all of these have to be set up ahead of time and has always been available in Vault. What is different in 2025 is now that you can now trigger it on a whole folder by right-clicking an entire folder and choosing the purge command. Or whenever you do a lifecycle transition, you have that option to purge. So for example, when you transition a file from work in progress to released, any of those files that you've transitioned from work in progress to be released will be submitted to the Vault server for candidates for purging. So it'll now check those files for purging. And the server will still be the one to purge those files. So those purge are done on the server, and it's done on a scheduled task on the server, which I believe is every hour by default. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, this one is quite simple. Not really thinking that this is going to be a big issue because you either should be using Autodesk ID now for your password or for your logins to Vault, or you should be using Windows authentication or Windows account. But in case you're still using the Vault account, right, the normal Vault account, you can now configure a password policy. Okay, and in addition to doing that for the thick client, the thin client users can also do that. So in the 2025 version, if you enforce this password policy and you had a thin client user, they could not change their password directly on that interface, on the thin client interface. They had to go to someone who had a full Vault client and then change it there. In 2025.1, you can now reset your password on the thin client itself after enforcing this password reset. Or sorry, after enforcing this password policy. So small change, but less headache for Vault admins. In terms of IT admins as well, there's some backup and restore enhancements. Now you can back up just the databases. And I'll tell you, like in 99% of the Vault setups that we've got, I'd say 90% of the time is backing up the file store, which is all the files inside the Vault itself. Only 10% of the time is the databases. So you can actually now back up just the databases, and then you can have another mechanism to back up the file store because it's just basically another set of files. So this is something that's really good inside 2025. This has actually been available in the 2024.2 updates, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, in 2025.1, if you use a third-party tool for file store backup, in the past, that would not be recognized on the ADMS as the number of days of the last server console backup. Now, if you're using a third-party tool, it will actually allow that. Okay, now if you look at participants, for those who are actually viewing the files, particularly for those using the thin client, now there's some small improvements. You can now navigate easily between workspaces because, and let me just give you a bigger view of this one. Okay, you have these icons now here on the side to navigate through the different workspaces that you've got. Okay, so that's quite quite useful. You also have the sorting behavior when you're looking for files, for example. The sorting behavior here is of the columns are very similar to the Vault client or Vault thick client. Like in the past, if you had any shortcuts, it would actually put the shortcuts at the bottom, even though they were same name. Now it actually groups them together as consecutive as long as they've got the same name. So that's the same as a thick client. And you also have this small feature because, if you've got a very deep folder structure, which I don't, but there's some cases that there are, you couldn't move this bar in the past. Now you can move that bar. In terms of other enhancements, now you can also add your own logo into the thin client quite easily. In the past, there was quite an extensive workaround for that. Now that's out of the box. And you can also have or set what is the default landing page that when a user logs in, they will automatically go, for example, to the files workspace as the default. You can also hide other workspaces. So for example, if you're not using items or change orders in your Vault, then you might as well hide the items and change order workspace so that users who are using the thin client, they will only ever have the Project Explorer, the files area available to them. Okay, now again, another small enhancement. You will now be able to see BOM bill of material properties when you're using items in the thin client. So in the past, the thin client, you couldn't see the BOM properties. Now you can now see them in the thin client. And as you see here in the bill of materials view of an item, and again, this is only for items though, not for files. In the bill of materials view, you can now customize the property headers that you want. Yep, sorry, I mentioned this earlier, moving around the browser, and that's in 2025.1. Sorry, the folder view, making it larger, smaller. Some small enhancements, and these really are for those who want to get into the nitty gritty of Vault, and if you're doing a bit of customization inside Vault as well. Now we have a design substitute design classification, right? So that'll help you classify anything that you've defined as a substitute, for example, inside Inventor, when you're using model states, you can now create a certain rule so that it's categorized differently or created differently. Okay. The DXF flat pattern, when Vault 2024 introduced creating DXFs into the job processor for Inventor files. Now, in the past, if that IPT file did not have a flat pattern, it would just say could not create DXF file. Now it's more explicit in saying, hey, I can't create because there is no flat pattern for that file. Now, in terms of looking at the results of a job processor, in the past, if the error was long, or especially if you have a long folder path, you couldn't exactly see what the error was if you look at the results panel. But now in Vault 2025.1, the scroll bar is now available, and you can use Control-A and Control-C to copy everything. Again, small thing, but to those who troubleshoot Vault a lot, this is a really big help. Now, in 2024, what happened was that there was a new feature in Vault that you could define, for, particularly for Inventor users, you could define where in Vault your design data and your templates are for Inventor, so that whenever you had a user who logged in to Inventor or to Vault from Inventor, it would actually update automatically your design data and your style and your templates on the local machine. So if the admin had made changes, then it would do it. The problem was that this would happen for admins as well. So if they did not check in any changes that they made on their design data or templates, for some reason they didn't check it in, they closed Inventor, they closed Vault, and then they open it up again, it would actually go in and overwrite everything again for the admin. So they would have to start from scratch any changes that they made. In 2025.1, so again, if you're using 2024 or 2025, very useful to install for 2025.1, because now the feature will check whether the file is checked out. If it is, then it will no longer be downloaded and overwritten on the local. Okay. So again, small thing, but quite a big impact. And I think I'm right on time. Yes, I am. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd like to open the floor to any questions. So if you want to, you can just unmute yourselves. Let me see if I can do that. Or if you wanted to, just ask a question on the chat window. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you wanted to. Hmm. Okay. Nothing. Okay. No worries, Kurt. Um, Pat, yes, this presentation is recorded, and you will be able to view this. You will be get sent a link to this particular recording of the presentation. Lee had a question regarding implementation of DXF generation. Where is this information located? So you can have a look at the Vault help, and I'm not mistaken, it's this one here. So you will need to go to DXF options, right? You have options, for example. I will admit though, that it's quite simple, the DXF options that you've got. But I guess for 80% of the time, it'll work in your situation, most possibly. But basically, this is where you set it. It's also available, for example, when you do a life cycle state change. So for example, um, if you're releasing, for example, a particular file, if you want it to be triggered on a transition when a file goes from work in progress to released, under the actions, okay, you have the synchronized properties, update the selected file types using job server. You can also choose DXF in this particular example, or flat pattern DXF from IPT files. So that is assuming that you have a job process. By the way, for any PDF, DXF, or step file creation, you will need to have a job processor running. There is no other way. It does. If you want to do it through Vault, you will need to have the job processor running. All right. Thanks, Rob. Yep. We'll wait to hear from you. Is there any way to send specific file type notification when having lifecycle change? For example, I just want to send IPT and IAM file notification, not including IPN or IDW. That's a great question, Wenji. At this point, there is no filter for that. So it is going purely on the life cycle state changes like this. So there is no rules to say that only apply this for IPT files. The only way around it is that if you have a separate lifecycle definition for IPTs and IAMs, and another separate lifecycle definition for IPNs and IDWs. There's actually good argument to do that, again, depending on your workflow, because we've seen workflows, for example, models don't get reviewed as thoroughly as drawings. So for example, a model could only go from work in progress, review, released, whereas drawings, you'll have work in progress, design check, engineer check, and then issued for manufacture. So it's typically only on the drawings that the email notifications will be configured, whereas for models, they will not have any email notifications configured. But Wenji, actually, that's a great suggestion. Maybe that's something that you can put into the idea station, that there are filters applied to this particular one, because I do understand, yes, um, there are cases where you just have one lifecycle definition that covers both drawings and part files. Lee had a question. Could you inform the best way or any way to ensure rev number is linked to inventor file at part level and sync to drawing and vault? Okay, so I guess the first thing that I could say is that yes, you can sync the rev number is linked to the inventor file at the part level. That's really done to the properties mapping, right? So you have, for example, the system property called revision, and you will see here that's actually mapped to the inventor property for rev number. Okay, that's the best way to get that. Now, the other question is to ensure and is synced to the drawing and Vault. Now, I'm not sure if what you're referring to is to make sure that the part file revision is the same as the drawing revision. Inside Vault, that is not something that can be done out of the box. You could write some iLogic scripts that could do that for you, or simply actually just have the title block inside Inventor reflect the revision of the model. So, for example, I'm going to create a new drawing template here. Okay. So in this particular title block, I'm going to edit that definition. That rev number here, right now it's reading from the standard I properties of the drawing, but you can actually say that I want that to display the rev number of the model or whatever model you've assigned to it. Okay, so now this will reflect the model. Now inside Vault, obviously, this will reflect the model, but the I property of the IDW itself will still be on its own. So what you might want to do then is, again, you do this on a template on the document settings. You have an option here under drawing and copy model I property settings, and you can say copy the model rev number. What's my rev number? Oh, that's strange. Rev approved, rev drawn, revision number. Sorry, there it is. Going blind. The rev number, copy this to the I property value as well. So you can do that method as well, so that you're sure that the I property of this particular model, or sorry, drawing, is the same as whatever is in the model. Okay. All right. No worries, Lee. Any other questions? Just having a look at our list. No, nothing else from what it looks. Okay, once again, thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. We get 5 minutes back in our day. I hope you have a great day ahead. Yeah, thanks again for attending. Talk to you soon. Bye.